Hi, my name is Catherine Atkins, and this is my management retrospective. So, for this assignment, I took together certain things from the modules that we did. So, going over everything theory X and Y, self efficacy theory, PDCA cycle, team development, and then I looked inward and thought of my personal strengths, areas of improvement, and my ideal work environment, and then I kind of go over some of my favorite or my preferred management styles. So the first thing that I went into was theory X and Y, and the idea is that you should manage people differently depending on if they like their job or if they don't like their job. So if you don't like your job, that is theory X, and this theory states that your worker has low motivation and it calls for a higher degree of control. So you are going to have to be more involved, making sure that things get done in a very specific way. There isn't room for creativity, and you want things to be exactly the same. So for this image over here, I chose kind of this idea of a bakery. I used to work in a bakery, and there's kind of this idea that all of the breads need to be exactly the same, put in the oven, taken out, packaged at a certain speed, and everything's by the numbers, by the rules. Motivation is based off of um, kind of avoiding punishment more than the love of your craft. Um, Again, there's less choice, less trust in your workers, and it could potentially create an us versus them dynamic between the managers and employers. Not very many people really like their managers in environments like this. At least most of the time, I didn't. Is what I've noticed personally. Versus theory Y, there's high motivation, and it calls for more autonomy for employees. So if people like their jobs, they want to see it improved regardless of if there's punishment from their manager. Creativity and independence is more highlighted. So, you know, if you are working in web development or something like that, you might appreciate more when someone does something in a little bit of a different way, um, than in something that's a little bit more controlled, like a bakery. So I think that in a library, I would hopefully want to do more of theory Y. I hope that people want to bring in their own ideas for programming, displays, and outreach. I think having everyone be a little bit different is actually a benefit rather than a hindrance in an environment like that. So I would want to encourage that. So then there is self-efficacy theory of motivation. So the idea of this is that motivation is increased if someone believes that they can succeed, and motivation will be higher. And it's broken down into three parts, which is mastery experience. So being successful in attempts at similar tasks. So if you want to, get better at sports or whatever that might be, you might first say, I'm going to run a mile in 10 minutes before you say you're going to run a mile in 9 minutes or so, or even, 12, 13 minutes, whatever. So you can see yourself be accomplished in a goal that's similar, and then it helps you see yourself becoming successful in the future. Vicarious experience is watching someone else succeed at a task, so you know it's possible, and you can kind of see how they might have done something, and learn from that. Next is verbal persuasion, so someone telling you that you're doing a good job or giving you pointers that can increase your willingness and motivation versus if they were telling you that you don't know what you're doing or that you're hopeless would lower your motivation. Some limits that I saw in this theory is that oftentimes tasks can get kind of boring and that can lower motivation. So even if you know that you can do something, you can just get bored with it, and your motivation for doing it is going to be quite low. I don't particularly like gardening, and it's not very fun for me, not very rewarding, so I don't want to do it, even though I know I could. Um, so that can lower my motivation. I'd also say that pain and injury can lower motivation to do something. Again, working at a bakery, after a while I got some carpal tunnel in my wrists, and that was something that made me not want to go into work because I knew that was going to hurt. So it lowered my motivation, even though I knew I could do it. And I would also say personal life experiences. So people can be distracted by personal events in their lives. People get sick, family members pass away, things like that. Other life difficulties can lower motivation. And just very briefly, I'd like to say that a lot of these motivation theories kind of take these personal life experiences and blame it on the individual, when I kind of think it should be thought of in the motivation theory, because everyone is going to have ups and downs in their life, and so it should be accounted for rather than seen as like an anomaly, because it is something that is going to happen to everyone at some point. So just something to consider. Next is the PDCA cycle. So that stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act, and this kind of borrows from the scientific method or scientific theories, where you observe something, create a hypothesis about whatever you've observed, you conduct your experiment, you look over the results of your experiment, and then you create a new hypothesis. So I think this could be good if done correctly. So I know I wrote about people and returning their books and eliminating late fees. So you could kind of create a hypothesis. Maybe more people would use the library if they didn't have to worry about late fees, especially for like kids' books and things, because your kids are going to lose them. It might take some time to get them back. Or especially for people who might not have money, lower income families who might not be able to afford late fees. So you could implement this by saying, we're going to get rid of late fees, and then observing what happens. Do books not get returned? Do they get checked out for way longer than they should? Do people like the policies? How many books do they check out? Things like that. Taking that information and deciding if it is something that the library wants to go through with in the future, versus maybe someone wants to do a study and it goes against their own egos, perhaps. They might think, oh, well, I came up with this idea for the library, and they're really attached to it. So even if it doesn't work, they might not want to admit that people don't really care about their program. They might try to create excuses for it. So that would kind of ruin the experiment, which happens in real life all the time too. It's just something to be mindful of. I would also say to be careful not to see your employees as guinea pigs, or kind of create this prisoner's dilemma with them. Treating one half of your employees differently than the other half is, of course, not ethical, and shouldn't be done. So I think it's a good idea. I would just caution people to use it well. Next, I looked at stages of team development. So the stages are forming, storming, norming, and performing. So forming is when someone is new. They're new to their roles. They want to not rock the boat so much. They are polite to each other, maybe a little bit shy or meek or mild. But then once someone becomes more comfortable in their role, they start to conflict. Maybe they don't like how things are being done, or they don't like how a person is doing something. There's conflict and defensiveness. You don't understand what I'm trying to do. This person doesn't know what they're talking about, etc. And a manager should be able to come in and create the norming stage where you define your goals and create balance, redefining roles, I would say, and stating what the goals are. Again, creating that balance. And then performing is having a trusting environment with collaboration and problem solving. I think that it's probably not just going to be this cut and dry thing. You're probably going to go from performing, norming, storming, and back around again, depending on how the team works and what kind of projects you're working on. I think there's always going to be some sort of conflict, unless you have a very easygoing team. So throughout this class, I've kind of thought about my own personal strengths. I think that I am thoughtful in my reflections. I like to think of things from multiple perspectives, and I don't know, I kind of poke holes in things a little bit to look at things from all sides before things go wrong, I guess. I have a desire for fairness. I want things to be fair. I want people to feel like they aren't being taken advantage of and that they're being listened to. And I don't want people to feel jaded. So desire for fairness is important for me. I think I have high empathy and compassion. I want people to feel good where they're at. I understand that people have lives outside of work and that people are complicated and that they're individuals. So I want to be able to keep that with me if I decide to go into management or whatever that might look like. I see myself as a leader rather than, or I guess I see myself as a director rather than someone who's controlling people. So I have been mistaken for a manager before at my bakery job. And I think the way that I would run things when the managers weren't around and they kind of put me in charge sometimes, kind of observing the situation, understanding what people were good at and putting them in those positions. And people typically liked that. People like to do things that they're good at. So I think that worked out pretty well, and people said that they liked me, so that's good. And then I also really value commitment to trust and transparency. I think that goes in with my desire for fairness, in that I want people to feel like they understand my decision-making processes, and that it makes sense to them. And for things that I might not be able to share, like I might not be able to tell someone why, Veronica doesn't have to stand for her job. And I know it's because she has, a medical issue that makes it so she can't stand for long periods of time. I might not be able to tell them why, but I would hope that me being transparent in other areas and me telling them, I can't tell you the specifics on that, but you'll just have to trust me that, I was transparent with you in the past, and these decisions that I'm making are not flippant, I guess. And then my personal weaknesses or areas of improvement. I can get overwhelmed easily. So, if I feel like there's an important decision that I have to make, that can be kind of overwhelming. I don't want to make the lives of other people more difficult by making the wrong decision. That can be difficult for me. I've noticed with some of our discussions, I seem to have a low patience for certain topics, like book bans or censorship in general. In one of our discussions, people said that they were more willing to have a back and forth with patrons about book bans and other issues. And I'm not sure if they were just saying that for the assignment or if it was something that they actually believed in. I felt more dismissive of the idea. I've dealt with patrons who I've disagreed with in the past, and I'm a little bit more, I don't want to get in an argument with you. I don't think we're going to change each other's minds. This isn't a debate. I'm not, going to go in this with you. Go online, talk to the county about this. I no longer want to talk about this. Um, so I'm more dismissive, I guess. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's something to think about, I guess. And then I can also be kind of conflict avoidant, especially with people who I know. Um, so if someone's unhappy with me, I take it pretty personally. And I think I'd rather avoid the issue at pretty much at all costs. If someone doesn't want to do something, then I will do it for them. I'm like, well, I ought to do it. And then that way I don't have to confront them. And then all of a sudden I'm taking on more than I need to. And that becomes an expectation, and it's not something I want either. So, something to think about. My ideal in work environment, again, high trust, creative, fairness and flexibility, self management, transparency, and people over metrics. So, being in a library, I think having people over metrics should be easy enough because you're not selling things or trying to, make your shareholders happy, which I'm pretty pleased with. And then just kind of briefly looking at some management styles. I think I have some aspects of democratic management where I want to hear other people's opinions, and kind of make people feel like they are collectively owning something. Of course, I want to make the final decision. I think that's the only fair way of doing things. I think the traditional democratic management can kind of place all the responsibility on other people. So it's like, oh, well, this thing went wrong, but we all voted for it, so it's really not my fault. And I don't think that's fair. I think the manager should take responsibility for those things. Servant leadership, focusing on, again, listening, empathy, self awareness, and kind of making sure that people feel dedicated to things based off of their own like personal wants and stuff. Of course, I can't force that on someone, but trying to make people feel like part of a collective. And then coaching leadership, I like to consider individuals and their strengths and what they like or not like and how they can improve. So more of a mentor and mentee style direction. Um, I think that can be difficult because you have to get to know people individually, but that's something that I would like to do, especially in a smaller group of people. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.